The temporary anonymity of a massive floating resort does strange things to the human moral compass. People who would never shoplift at home will suddenly meticulously plot to steal commercial bedding. By exploring these real, documented incidents, we can see exactly how the illusion of endless abundance completely short-circuits rational decision-making at sea. Please, do not try this. 1. It is a well-documented phenomenon in behavioral economics that when human beings pay a large upfront sum for an all-inclusive experience, their brains undergo a strange recalibration regarding the concept of ownership, often blurring the boundary between a rented hospitality space and a personal retail warehouse. You can see this when someone takes a handful of extra complimentary soaps, but it takes a truly spectacular level of cognitive dissonance to look at a piece of heavy structural room decor and decide it belongs in your checked luggage. A 47-year-old passenger named Greg, an insurance adjuster from Cleveland, Ohio, occupying a standard balcony cabin on a massive 4,000-passenger American megaship, apparently felt that his life was incomplete without the stateroom's primary piece of art. This was not a small, tasteful desk ornament. It was a 40 by 60-inch framed canvas print depicting a remarkably uninspiring, monotonously beige Tuscan vineyard, and it was permanently fastened to the bulkhead using 4 heavy-duty maritime security brackets designed specifically to withstand both Category 3 hurricane swells and sticky fingers. If you have ever had to sit on top of your suitcase just to force the zipper closed over an extra pair of shoes, ask yourself what level of pure spatial delusion is required to pack a piece of wall art the size of a dining table. Greg did not let maritime engineering or basic geometry deter him. According to the stateroom attendant's daily log, the painting was in its rightful place during the morning service on the final day of the voyage. But by the evening turndown, the wall above the sofa featured nothing but 4 protruding metal studs and a faint rectangular shadow. The sheer logistical effort required to execute this extraction is staggering. Greg had somehow spent his final afternoon at sea inside his cabin, using a tiny TSA-approved keychain multi-tool to systematically perform a 4-hour orthopedic surgery on the wall, patiently unscrewing heavy hex bolts just to free a mass-produced print. But the true comedy of the situation did not arrive until disembarkation morning in the cruise terminal. You cannot simply slide a piece of drywall-sized decor into a standard hardshell roller. When Greg arrived at the gangway security checkpoint, he was casually strolling toward the exit, dragging his suitcase with his right hand, while his left arm was wrapped around a massive, heavy rectangular slab hastily swaddled in 3 blue and white striped ship pool towels. The security officer, staring blankly at a man attempting to smuggle what looked like a stolen monolith off the vessel, politely asked him to step aside and unwrap his cargo. When the towels were pulled back to reveal the ship's property, Greg did not panic, break a sweat, or offer an apology. Instead, standing completely deadpan in the middle of a chaotic, crowded terminal, he calmly informed the security staff that because he had prepaid his daily gratuities and the unlimited drink package, the decorative room amenities were legally included in the final fare. He then looked the bewildered security officer dead in the eye and asked if the ship had any spare industrial bubble wrap, expressing genuine, heartfelt concern that the massive wooden frame might get scratched by the baggage handlers on his flight back to Ohio. 2. The physical properties of high-density commercial memory foam dictate that once it is removed from its vacuum-sealed factory packaging and allowed to expand to its full volume, reversing the process requires either industrial compression equipment or a fundamental misunderstanding of physics. Chloe, a 24-year-old marketing assistant from Chicago traveling solo in an interior cabin on Deck 11 of a European cruise line, decided she was uniquely capable of defying these natural laws. Over the course of a 7-day sailing, she had fallen deeply in love with the plush, 2-inch thick mattress topper provided by the ship, and on the final night, she decided she was taking it home. She stripped the bed entirely, rolled the heavy king-sized polyurethane foam into a massive, uneven, highly volatile cylinder, and attempted to desperately wrestle it into a 28-inch hard-shell suitcase. When her cabin steward opened the door to deliver the final morning's disembarkation luggage tags, he did not find a packed room. He was greeted by the surreal image of Chloe sitting entirely cross-legged on top of a severely bulging piece of luggage, bouncing up and down with intense rhythmic determination in a desperate attempt to force the zipper closed around a protruding, relentlessly expanding marshmallow of white foam. She looked up at the steward, completely breathless. Her hair sticking to her forehead, smiled a perfectly pleasant casual smile, and asked him if he happened to have 2 heavy-duty bungee cords and a roll of duct tape. 3. There is a specific psychological breaking point where frugal vacationing stops being a financial strategy and crosses over into a heavily premeditated, covert logistical operation. Group polarization theory tells us that when like-minded people gather, their individual ideas become more extreme, which perfectly explains how Gary, a 68-year-old retired accountant from Boca Raton, Florida, along with his 3 67-year-old traveling companions, essentially became a synchronized sabotage unit. Occupying adjacent balconies on a 14-day transatlantic crossing, they found that long stretches of uninterrupted sea days could easily mutate boredom into strange obsessions. Their obsession was extracting absolute maximum value from the cruise line through the systematic dismantling of their cabin's electrical infrastructure. The operation began quietly on day 3, when the stateroom attendant noted that both television remotes in the 2 cabins were missing their back covers and batteries. He dutifully replaced them, assuming they had simply fallen under the sofa. On day 5, the heavy-duty batteries powering the electronic safes vanished. By day 8, the situation escalated from minor missing items to a perceived total mechanical failure. The cabin steward reported that both bedside reading lamps, the vanity mirror lights, and the overhead balcony fixtures had all simultaneously stopped working. Believing they were dealing with a severe localized short circuit in the ship's wiring, the maintenance department dispatched 2 marine electricians carrying heavy diagnostic equipment. The engineers spent 20 minutes painstakingly testing the circuits, only to discover that there was absolutely nothing wrong with the electrical grid. The fixtures were simply empty. The heavy, specialized marine-grade LED bulbs had been entirely unscrewed and meticulously removed from every socket in both rooms. But the actual twist, the detail that elevates this from petty theft to a masterpiece of absurd, self-inflicted disaster, was how they ultimately got caught. The guests had realized that these specialized, commercial-grade maritime components were expensive, and they had escalated from hoarding in their room to a late-night harvesting operation, quietly unscrewing bulbs from empty hallway sconces. They knew that walking off the ship with a transparent bag full of electronics would alert gangway security, so they devised a smuggling method. They took their large, stainless steel insulated thermoses, unscrewed the bottoms, and packed the hollow metal cylinders completely full of stolen lithium batteries, wire contacts, and glass bulbs. This would have worked, except for one catastrophic logistical error. On the final night of the cruise, passengers are required to place their large luggage in the hallway by midnight so the crew can collect it and transfer it to the terminal. Instead of keeping the loaded thermoses in their carry-on bags, the group packed them deep inside their checked suitcases. Every single piece of checked luggage on a major cruise ship goes through a high-powered automated X-ray scanner in the ship's lower marshalling area before it touches land. At 3 in the morning, the security officer monitoring the screen stopped the conveyor belt in sheer panic. He was looking at a suitcase containing 4 dense metal cylinders tightly packed with dense wiring, metal contacts, and multiple lithium power sources. To a maritime safety system, this instantly triggers a severe hazardous materials protocol. Unregulated lithium batteries are strictly banned in the cargo hold due to the extreme risk of thermal runaway and uncontrollable cargo fires. The discovery triggered an immediate, ship-wide safety response, and the vessel's fire containment team was placed on standby. At 4 in the morning, the 4 elderly passengers were pulled from their beds by a team of severe, unsmiling security officers. They were completely terrified, fully expecting a minor scolding for petty theft. Instead, they had to stand shivering in their pajamas in the heavily guarded lower-deck security office while the ship's safety officer, wearing heavy heat-resistant gloves, carefully opened their metal thermos only to pour out 26 stolen AA batteries and 14 reading light bulbs onto a stainless steel table. The ultimate irony, which the chief engineer gleefully pointed out while writing up the massive hazardous materials fine, was rooted in fundamental maritime operational facts. Cruise ship lighting systems often run on a specialized 220-volt marine grid to manage power consumption across thousands of cabins. Even if Gary and his friends had successfully smuggled their stolen bulbs back to Florida and screwed them into their standard 110-volt household lamps, the bulbs would have produced absolutely no light whatsoever. 4. Hospitality trays and high-end suites are explicitly designed to offer a comforting illusion of endless, luxurious abundance, but they rely heavily on the unspoken social contract that a passenger will only consume a normal human amount of hot beverages in a 24-hour period. Richard, a 62-year-old retired dentist, and his 61-year-old wife Brenda, an elegantly dressed couple from Scottsdale, Arizona, sailing on a premium luxury line, decided to treat their daily replenishment of high-end Earl Grey tea bags and raw sugar packets not as a morning courtesy, but as a pharmaceutical prescription that needed to be strictly and mercilessly harvested. Every single morning, Brenda would open the wooden presentation box, swiftly sweep all 12 assorted premium tea bags and 20 individual sugar packets directly into her oversized leather handbag and snap the empty box shut. The steward, strictly adhering to the high standards of luxury service that forbid questioning a guest's consumption, would refill it completely every afternoon, only to find it entirely stripped bare again by dinner service. By day 10, they had successfully hoarded roughly 240 tea bags. This slow, methodical, entirely unopposed accumulation evidently built a dangerous level of confidence, because on the morning of disembarkation in Miami, the heavy, commercial-grade electric water kettle, along with its entire solid mahogany-based tray, vanished from the desk. Brenda was subsequently stopped at the gangway in the middle of a sweltering July afternoon because she was attempting to casually wear a thick, heavy winter trench coat that featured a very distinct, severely protruding, kettle-shaped bulge, severely stretching the fabric directly against her left hip. 5. There is a fascinating concept in behavioral economics known as the psychology of perceived scarcity, which suggests that when human beings are presented with an apparently unlimited resource, a certain percentage of the population will instinctively view it not as a relaxing convenience, but as a challenge to be conquered. I want you to honestly ask yourself how much your personal vacation time is worth by the hour, and then consider the deeply calculated behavior of a 53-year-old man named Dave and his 51-year-old wife, Susan. They were an otherwise respectable couple from Calgary, Alberta, sailing on a 10-day Southern Caribbean itinerary. Modern cruise lines have largely phased out those tiny single-use plastic toiletry bottles, replacing them with large, tamper-proof, wall-mounted pump dispensers filled with premium, spa-grade shampoo and citrus body wash. These thick plastic cylinders are securely locked into heavy stainless steel brackets inside the shower, designed specifically so that guests can comfortably use exactly what they need and nothing more. Dave and Susan looked at this hygienic, heavily engineered maritime amenity and saw an untapped municipal reserve that rightfully belonged to them. Before ever leaving their home in Canada, they had deliberately packed 4 completely empty 32-ounce plastic sports drink bottles deep in their checked luggage. Every single morning, while Susan was up on deck 9 at the buffet, quietly hoarding individual butter pats in a thermal tote bag, Dave would step into the cabin shower fully clothed. He would then spend 25 agonizing minutes repeatedly pressing the rigid dispensing pump, manually extracting tiny quarter-sized blobs of body wash into his large plastic bottles until his thumb physically cramped. The cabin steward, noticing the dispensers were completely bone-dry every single afternoon, simply assumed the couple was taking an extraordinary number of daily showers and dutifully unlocked the brackets to insert fresh, liter-sized refill cartridges. This silent, unacknowledged dance went on for 8 full days, resulting in the successful harvesting of nearly 2 gallons of industrial body wash. But the thrill of the manual pump had apparently lost its luster, because on day 9, Dave decided to speed up the process. Instead of pumping, he realized he could manually unscrew the bottom reservoir cap of the newly installed dispenser. His plan was to let the thick blue liquid pour elegantly into his plastic bottle. What Dave failed to account for was the sheer weight and viscosity of a full liter of commercial soap. The moment the plastic threads released, the entire bottom of the dispenser gave way, and roughly 3 pounds of thick, highly concentrated blue gel instantly dropped in a single, perfectly cohesive blob. It completely missed his bottle and landed directly on his socks, instantly turning the bathroom floor into a frictionless skating rink of citrus-scented slime. Realizing he could not clean up a full liter of industrial soap with 2 tiny face cloths, Dave was forced to call housekeeping. He then had to stand awkwardly in the hallway in soapy socks, attempting to explain to his deeply unimpressed steward that the dispenser had simply spontaneously malfunctioned, while 4 fully loaded, neatly labeled sports bottles of stolen body wash sat highly visible on the bathroom vanity directly behind him. 6. You can learn a lot about a person's fundamental risk assessment skills by observing what they consider to be a reasonable and inconspicuous souvenir. Marcus, a 28-year-old software developer from Denver, Colorado, was sailing on a 7-day Mexican Riviera cruise. Instead of purchasing a standard magnet or a t-shirt in the duty-free shop, Marcus became intensely fixated on the main dining room's dinnerware. The ship used heavy, beautifully glazed ceramic plates, each uniquely stamped with the cruise line's vintage maritime logo on the back. Marcus decided he needed an entire matching set for his apartment. Every evening after dessert, while his table mates were distracted, he would slip a heavy, sauce-stained ceramic plate under his dark sweater and casually walk out of the dining room, walking with the stiff, perfectly upright posture of a nervous penguin to keep the dish from sliding out. By the end of the week, he had successfully hoarded 12 large dinner plates and tucked them deep inside his rolling suitcase. To avoid the crew discovering his heavy loot, Marcus chose the self-assist disembarkation option, meaning he had to carry his own luggage off the ship rather than letting the porters handle it. What Marcus failed to realize is that commercial maritime ceramics are designed to withstand industrial dishwashers and rough seas, making them incredibly dense. He was now dragging a suitcase that weighed over 80 pounds. As he awkwardly hauled the wildly unbalanced bag down the long, steep metal gangway ramp, the cheap plastic wheels of his luggage began to physically warp under the immense pressure. The ultimate karmic punishment arrived precisely as he reached the center of the bustling cruise terminal. Right in front of the final customs declaration desk, the immense downward force of the ceramics completely blew out the bottom zipper of his suitcase. The fabric ripped wide open under the immense pressure, and half of the heavy dinner plates crashed directly onto the polished concrete floor, instantly shattering into hundreds of sharp ceramic shards. The remaining intact plates forcefully spilled out, clattering loudly against the terminal floor. Marcus froze in absolute horror as a stern Port Authority officer immediately walked over to inspect the commotion. Instead of a smooth getaway, Marcus had to stand there awkwardly while a terminal janitor was summoned to sweep up the destroyed maritime property, and hundreds of disembarking passengers watched the humiliating spectacle in absolute silence. He was made to surrender the surviving plates to ship security, and because his suitcase was completely destroyed, he had to navigate his flight back to Colorado, carrying his wardrobe stuffed inside 2 clear plastic trash bags. 7. The concept of the sunk cost fallacy explains why human beings will spend enormous amounts of time and energy trying to justify an initial expense, even if their methods become entirely irrational. But there is a secondary psychological phenomenon unique to the cruise industry: the absolute, unwavering belief that maritime accounting systems can be easily outsmarted by basic terrestrial tricks. Richard, a 48-year-old regional sales manager, and his 46-year-old wife Helen, from Cherry Hill, New Jersey, were sailing on a 14-day Hawaiian itinerary. Their chosen target was not electronics or plumbing, but the ship's luxurious, oversized Egyptian cotton pool towels. These beautiful blue and white striped towels are highly coveted, which is exactly why the cruise line implements a strict digital tracking system. Passengers must scan their room card to check out a towel, and if it is not returned by the end of the voyage, an automatic $25 replacement fee is charged to their folio. Richard and Helen had recently purchased a small summer cabin and decided that outfitting their new property with complimentary luxury maritime linens was an absolute necessity. However, they knew they could not simply walk off the ship with a few stolen towels in their carry-on. Their operation required industrial logistics. Before the cruise, they had packed a portable, battery-operated vacuum pump and a large box of heavy-duty, space-saving vacuum seal bags. Every single afternoon, the couple would march up to the Lido deck, happily scan their cards, and check out fresh pool towels. Instead of returning them, they took them back to their stateroom, carefully folded them into the plastic bags, and used the motorized pump to extract every ounce of air, compressing the fluffy cotton into dense, rock-hard, perfectly flat rectangular bricks. By the end of the voyage, they had successfully hoarded 20 pool towels, meticulously layered at the bottom of their massive checked luggage. The physical reality of 20 compressed luxury towels is staggering. Their suitcase now weighed over 70 pounds. But Richard had a master plan to evade the inevitable $500 penalty. On the final night of the cruise, he used the ship's Wi-Fi to log into his banking app and preemptively cancel the credit card he had placed on file at embarkation. He confidently assumed the cruise line would try to run the final charge, hit a declined card, and simply write off the loss as an administrative error. What Richard entirely misunderstood is the rigid, inescapable architecture of modern maritime security. Cruise ship gangways are digitally linked directly to the onboard accounting servers. You cannot physically leave the vessel if your digital folio is not balanced. On disembarkation morning, Richard and Helen strutted up to the exit gangway, completely convinced of their own genius. Richard confidently scanned his cruise card. Instead of a pleasant green chime, the security podium emitted a harsh buzzing red alarm, and the exit gates immediately locked. A security officer politely directed them to the guest services desk, where a manager informed Richard that he had a pending balance of $500 for unreturned linens, and his card had been declined. Richard feigned absolute outrage, loudly demanding to see the captain and claiming they had never taken a single towel. The manager, maintaining perfect hospitality composure, asked to inspect their wildly heavy, bulging piece of luggage. Richard, trapped in his own lie, reluctantly unzipped the bag. The security officer looked at the strange, flat plastic bricks and used the tip of a small penknife to gently puncture the top vacuum bag to inspect the contents. The moment the airtight seal was broken, the atmospheric pressure instantly equalized. The result was catastrophic. Without the vacuum compression holding them down, 20 massive, heavy cotton towels rapidly and relentlessly expanded all at once. The dense bricks of fabric swelled like rising dough, completely blowing out the remaining sides of the suitcase and erupting onto the lobby floor in a sprawling, uncontrollable mountain of striped terry cloth. Richard and Helen were forced to stand in humiliated silence as the surrounding passengers openly laughed at their exploded luggage. They did not get to keep a single towel, and they still could not leave the ship until Richard sheepishly pulled out a completely different active credit card to pay the bill. 8. The anonymity of a large cruise ship sometimes makes passengers feel like they are operating in a vacuum where basic social norms and logic no longer apply. This is especially true when it comes to the luxurious, curved wooden hangers provided in premium staterooms. These hangers are specifically designed with heavy steel anti-theft rings that permanently loop around the closet bar, meaning the wooden body must be detached from the hook to be used. Jessica, a 31-year-old financial analyst from Miami, decided that her apartment wardrobe desperately needed these exact heavy mahogany hangers. However, she knew that leaving an entirely empty closet would instantly alert her cabin steward. Her solution was a masterclass in highly premeditated, absurdly flawed substitution. Before flying to the port, Jessica had gone to her local discount dry cleaner and collected 50 of the thinnest, cheapest, most structurally compromised white wire hangers imaginable. She packed them in her luggage, taking up a massive amount of space. On the first sea day, she spent an hour meticulously unhooking 50 beautiful mahogany hangers, packing them away, and replacing them with her flimsy wire substitutes. She then carefully hung all of her elegant evening gowns and silk blouses on the cheap wire. She honestly believed the cabin steward, who cleans the room twice a day, would simply open the closet, see clothes hanging there, and not notice the difference. The visual contrast was instantly staggering. When the steward opened the heavy walnut doors of the luxury suite's walk-in closet to place a piece of her luggage with her clothes inside, he was greeted by a scene that looked like the back room of a struggling laundromat. The heavy evening gowns were severely sagging on the bending wire, completely ruining the aesthetic of the $5,000 suite. The steward did not say a word to her. He simply took a photograph of the sad wire hangers with his company tablet, submitted it to inventory control, and Jessica woke up the next morning to find a quiet, highly detailed charge of $500 gracefully applied to her onboard account for 50 luxury maritime wardrobe fixtures. She spent the rest of the cruise silently hanging her expensive dresses on 30-cent wire. 9. There is a deeply entrenched frugality among certain travelers that causes them to view standard hospitality services not as a convenience, but as a financial trap to be outsmarted. The concept of loss aversion perfectly explains why a passenger will happily spend thousands of dollars on a luxury vacation, only to suffer a complete psychological breakdown over a $35 laundry fee. Harold, a 54-year-old high school math teacher from Detroit, Michigan, was sailing on a 10-day Mediterranean cruise. By day 6, he had run out of clean shirts. The ship offered a midweek special where they would wash, fold, and press an entire bag of laundry for a flat rate. Harold flatly refused to participate in what he called a corporate shakedown. Instead, he decided to turn his premium balcony stateroom into a DIY laundromat. He spent 2 hours meticulously hand-washing his entire vacation wardrobe in the tiny bathroom sink, using the complimentary citrus body wash. But a wet wardrobe requires drying, and Harold had a brilliant life hack. He strung a heavy nylon parachute cord back and forth across his glass balcony, essentially building a complex web of drying lines, and securely pinned his wet polo shirts, trousers, and socks to the rigging. He assumed the warm Mediterranean breeze would simply air-dry his clothes overnight. Harold fundamentally misunderstood the physics of maritime travel. When a massive cruise ship is moving at 22 knots into a 10-knot headwind, the balcony does not experience a gentle breeze. It experiences the constant force of a severe gale. Furthermore, cruise ships run on massive marine diesel engines, which constantly vent a fine, microscopic byproduct called fly ash out of the top funnel. When you combine high-speed ocean winds, heavy salt spray, and unfiltered diesel exhaust, you do not get a drying breeze. You get an industrial atmospheric blender. Harold woke up the next morning, stepped out onto his balcony, and discovered a complete disaster. The sheer force of the wind had tightly wrapped his damp clothing around the balcony furniture, completely stretching out the collars of his shirts. But the real tragedy was the color. The wet fabric had acted as a perfect environmental filter, capturing every single particle of diesel soot and salt spray that blew past the ship. His entire wardrobe was now coated in a thick, greasy, permanent layer of black maritime exhaust. The citrus body wash had reacted with the soot, effectively dyeing his clothes a patchy, ruined gray. His brilliant life hack to save $35 ended up completely destroying $800 worth of clothing, forcing him to spend the remainder of his elegant European vacation wearing expensive, ship-branded souvenir t-shirts purchased from the gift shop at a massive markup. 10. You can accurately measure the sheer absurdity of a cheapskate life hack by calculating the actual financial value of the items destroyed to execute it. A vast subculture of cruise passengers is deeply dedicated to smuggling their own alcohol on board to avoid paying for expensive cocktails. Greg, a 44-year-old accountant from Chicago, Illinois, decided he was far too clever to pay $15 for a drink. He went online and researched classic smuggling techniques, settling on the famous shampoo bottle method. The night before their flight, while his wife was asleep, Greg quietly emptied her brand-new customized salon shampoo into the bathroom sink. He then meticulously rinsed the opaque bottle and filled it with a cheap, $12 bottle of dark-spiced rum, sealing it tightly and packing it in her toiletry bag. He successfully bypassed port security and smiled smugly, believing he had achieved the ultimate frugal victory. He hid the bottle in the cabin shower to keep it out of sight, planning to mix drinks later that evening. The critical flaw in his operation was that he never informed his wife. 2 hours before dinner, she stepped into the shower to wash her hair. She grabbed her trusted salon bottle, squeezed a generous palmful of dark liquid, and rubbed it directly into her scalp. Greg was sitting on the balcony when his wife walked out of the bathroom, absolutely furious and smelling entirely like a pirate tavern. Her hair was completely matted, sticky with pure sugarcane and alcohol. Greg's desperate attempt to save money on drinks ended up costing him a $120 bottle of bespoke shampoo, a severely ruined evening, and a mandatory $70 emergency appointment at the ship's salon to properly strip the rum out of his wife's hair. 11. The concept of the sunk cost fallacy dictates that people will often spend an irrational amount of time, energy, and money trying to justify an initial expense, completely blinding themselves to the absurdity of their own logic. In the highly contained ecosystem of a modern cruise ship, this mindset can easily mutate a rational adult into a dedicated hoarder of trivial hospitality supplies. Susan and Thomas, a retired couple in their late 60s from Scottsdale, Arizona, were sailing on a luxurious 14-day transatlantic crossing. This particular premium cruise line is famous for its afternoon tea service, which features small, exquisite jars of imported British clotted cream and specialized strawberry preserves. These tiny glass jars are deeply coveted, not just for the high-quality jam, but because the heavy miniature glassware makes for a perfect aesthetic souvenir. Susan, an avid home canner, became absolutely obsessed with securing a massive collection of these tiny jars for her own kitchen. She knew that simply asking the dining staff for 50 empty jars would be immediately denied. Instead, she initiated a heavily premeditated daily harvesting operation. Every afternoon, Susan and Thomas would attend the tea service and aggressively order extra scones, solely to receive more jars of jam. They would eat the scones, casually slip 4 or 5 unopened jars of preserves into Susan's oversized handbag, and quietly exit the dining room. By day 10 of the voyage, this daily ritual had resulted in the successful hoarding of 62 tiny heavy glass jars of jam, meticulously layered at the bottom of their massive checked luggage. What Susan fundamentally failed to calculate was the sheer, staggering weight of commercial glass and dense fruit preserves. 62 thick glass jars completely altered the structural integrity of her luggage. When they arrived at the airport in London for their flight back to Arizona, Susan confidently hoisted her suitcase onto the airline's digital scale. The screen instantly flashed a brilliant, angry red. The bag weighed 88 pounds, completely shattering the strict 50-pound international baggage limit. The airline ticketing agent, completely unbothered by Susan's sudden panic, calmly informed her that the overweight baggage penalty would be a staggering $300. Susan was faced with a catastrophic dilemma: pay $300 to transport roughly $40 worth of stolen strawberry jam, or abandon the jars. Her intense frugality, combined with her absolute refusal to admit defeat, triggered a deeply irrational response. Susan refused to pay the fee. Instead, right in the middle of a massive, heavily crowded terminal at Heathrow Airport, she unzipped her suitcase on the floor and began frantically pulling out handfuls of tiny glass jars. Because she could not bear the thought of simply throwing them away, and because she specifically only wanted the empty glass jars as souvenirs, she decided she had to empty them. For the next 30 minutes, hundreds of bewildered international travelers watched in absolute silence as a sharply dressed 60-something woman sat on the airport floor, furiously twisting off tiny metal lids and aggressively scooping gobs of premium British strawberry preserves directly into a plastic airport trash can with her bare hands. She then frantically wiped the sticky, heavily smeared glass jars with a packet of wet wipes and shoved the empty, incredibly sticky glassware into her carry-on tote bag. She successfully lowered her checked bag's weight, entirely avoiding the penalty fee. However, when she finally arrived home in Arizona and unpacked her hard-earned souvenirs, she discovered that the unwashed, sugary residue left inside the 62 hastily wiped jars had caused a massive, sticky leak inside her carry-on, completely fusing the tiny jars together in a solid, unbreakable brick of hardened strawberry sugar and entirely ruining her expensive leather handbag. The cruise environment acts as a psychological vacuum where basic logic vanishes. People will spend hundreds of dollars in damages just to steal a $20 item because they get addicted to the thrill of the heist. Have you ever seen someone trying to discreetly pack something ridiculous on disembarkation day? Subscribe for more analytical case studies on bizarre human behavior at sea.